Hey gang, Hammersill here. As you can see in this game, we've got Joe playing in the Tier 5 US destroyer Nicholas. We're on the ring map, and this is pretty good matchmaking. It's Tier 5s and Tier 4s. If you have not played the US DD line, you don't have the ability to what's called stealth torp until you get to the Tier 7 Mahan or Mahan. Take your pick. Either way, making effective use of the torpedoes can be challenging. One way that you can do that, and we'll highlight that here in this game, is to get ahead of an enemy push. Now, Joe asked me to critique this game. He's trying to improve his DD play. Now, I'm certainly not the world's best DD player, but I have played a lot of games in destroyers. So I told him I'd be glad to do that. And I apologize for the skipping. I'm not sure what's going on there. But Joe's decided he's going to help with the Delta Cap. You can see there's an Isakaze heading for the Alpha. The Isakaze's got a Phoenix, October Revolution, and New York backing him up. And Joe's got a considerable number of ships behind him as well. Now, just a really quick note. You'll see that Joe, just a moment ago, dropped all of his torpedoes into that gap. While there's nothing wrong with that, one thing that I'll point out is that when you blind fire torps early, even on a destroyer that has a fairly quick reload, you might miss an opportunity that will pop up just a second or so later. You can see right there on the display, there's a Britann, Omaha, Isakaze. And if nothing comes through that gap, he may have missed a chance to catch something with the torpedoes that's now directly ahead of him. There might be times, and certainly I have, when dropping torpedoes kind of blindly in the hope that maybe somebody will traverse an area is a really good idea. In a case like this at the beginning of the game, I tend to suggest hanging on to the torpedoes until you've identified targets. Sometimes you can see that a ship is heading in a particular direction, and then maybe you throw torps out in a case like that. But in a case where you're at the beginning of the game and you can guess a high likelihood that enemy destroyers in particular are going to be trying to contest caps that you may be heading for, I think it's probably a good idea to hang on to them until you have identified some targets. So we'll move on from there. Oh, and one other note about those torpedoes. I really would recommend using the narrow spread rather than the wide spread. It allows you to put the torpedoes more or less where you want them, with less opportunity for an enemy ship to maneuver through the torpedoes. Now, I think it's great that Joe's in the cap. I do. I think far too often destroyer players will find a reason not to cap. One thing I think I would probably do right now is push forward just a hair more to kind of right around here, and then smoke up. You have plenty of targets, and you've got a V-170 and a Monokukuli out there, or Monokukuli, I guess is how it's pronounced, who can spot for you. And then you'd have the Britann, Yubari, the Omaha, and if the Isakaze was spotted again, you'd have shots on him. As it stands, the Yubari is the best target. The other two may not be, depending upon how close to the island you are, may not even be something you could shoot. Now Yubari looks like he's about to dead end into that island. So Joe had the same idea. I think myself personally, I think Pushing forward just a hair more might have been a good idea. You can see where V170's at on the mini-map there at, well, Joe's start. Well, he's just about dead ahead of where Joe's at now. So he'd probably be spotting the ICOP if ICOP came back. And I think it's smart that Joe is staying on the Yubari. You've got an enemy ship on the ropes. And anytime you have an enemy ship on the ropes, you do what Joe just did. You do your darndest to finish it off. As I mentioned in another game not too long ago, you know, some games your offensive capabilities degrade as you take damage or are injured, etc. In this game that doesn't happen. Unless the system is destroyed, which can then be repaired. Ship maintains its full offensive capability. Occasionally you'll get, you know, a torpedo tube or a gun that is permanently destroyed, but in general, it's a good idea to just assume that any ship, even if it's almost completely destroyed in terms of its hit points, is still a threat. So again, Joe did, in my opinion, exactly what he needed to do there by helping finish off that Yubari. And he's making good use of his smoke here. Keeping an eye on the mini-map, he's got Kirov just kind of due north of him. So we've got to keep an eye on that ship. Kirov is very fast. It's a fast cruiser and it has hard-hitting guns. So if Kirov were to start to push in, that's something you definitely would want to be aware of. Now you can see on the mini-map there, Joe's detection radius, the little circle. It's kind of a pale green circle all around his ship. It's difficult to differentiate it between that and the actual delta cap circle, but it's a very, very pale green circle around his ship. Now, I'm not sure exactly what Joe was thinking here. You know, of course, I'm not a mind reader. My guess is he wanted to reposition and put his gun somewhere else. You can see Kirov is actually starting to move up. Now, the Kirov is in position to destroy the ICOP for sure, and ICOP is, I'm sure, spotted and just went ahead and fired. You saw how much damage that River Beast's ICOP took. So I'm going to stop it right here for just a second and point out something. So you saw the Jaguar, which was here on the mini-map, so he's out here somewhere. And you know that the Kirov is pushing in. He's going to be crossing through here. It's unlikely that the Kirov is going to come this way, because then he's going to have all of these ships that can put shells on him. More likely he's going to either slow here and just shoot through this gap where he can and kind of maneuver in order to be able to hit somebody, or push up behind this island where he can shoot out this way. Either way, there's an opportunity here, and it's going to depend upon how the Kirov moves. So we'll keep moving. We'll see what Joe does here. So we've got widespread torpedoes. Again, I would recommend going with narrow. So you've got 3 or 4 torpedoes that are just going to hit the island no matter what. Now Kirov is nose in right now, and Joe's detected. So he did the right thing. I think maybe just a second or two slow of smoking up. He could have gotten those guns working immediately. He was already spotted. Now this may have just been a case, and I know it's certainly true in a lot of cases, of not being familiar enough with where the key controls are, of, how do I smoke, or, if you've played thousands and thousands of games in destroyers, it's just an automatic thing. But if you're still getting familiar with them, sometimes it takes a second, and you look at the keyboard, and this is the key that I need in order to to smoke and slow down. And there's a lot to do simultaneously in this game, so I'm certainly not criticizing. But I think had he smoked up just a bit sooner and gotten the guns working sooner, he could have done a little bit more damage to the Kirov, and maybe the Kirov sunk right now rather than having somebody else have to put shells on it. Now, one thing I would recommend here, just looking at the positioning, I think here, I would be coming this way. I would be trying to put myself in a position where I could get outside of this Kirov's detection range, and rather than being so close, because if the Kirov's guns are still aimed out this way, as soon as Joe gets detected, Kirov is liable to fire on him, along with these two ships. So I think here maybe it was a good idea to traverse this way till this pale green circle of his detection radius was just south of where the Kirov is at. And then he's not spotted instantly. And that gives him a chance to, look around, see whether his friends are going to put the Kirov out of its misery or whether he needs to do it. No, somebody already took care of that. Still, though, I think what I was suggesting there as far as ensuring that you don't get spotted is a good idea. Now you can see the bad guys are down 3 ships, the good guys are down 5 ships. That's a hole to climb out of. The good guys have lost one of the 3 caps that they had, so both teams now have 2 caps. Okay, so Joe's moving straight at this Ganget. You can see where his detection radius is on the minimap. I think Joe probably would have done a little bit better here had he started heading in this way. Now, why do I say that? If somewhere around here Joe had started angling this direction, he could keep this island between his position and the Ganget. The Phoenix and the New York are both going to be spotting this battleship anyway. And what that allows him to do, because his torpedo range is only 5.5 kilometers, that allows him, if he's unseen by this Ganget, to throw torpedoes, if he was, say, here, to throw torpedoes across into the path of the Ganget. But one thing is sure, if the Ganget sees him, he is going to maneuver to avoid torpedoes. That's a gimme. Even at low tiers, most of the time, any captain who sees a destroyer up close is going to assume torpedoes are on the way. Now, occasionally you get somebody who's so brand new to the game that they just don't know, and they're still, how do I zoom out again? But usually anybody who's played the game at all, as soon as they see a destroyer, is going to maneuver to avoid torpedoes. And so I would recommend, in a case like this where you can see a battleship or another ship moving straight in toward where you're at, if you have cover, which he does right here in the form of this island, move to get behind that, because you've got your buddies out here who can spot him. And if he doesn't know you're there, he has no reason to start maneuvering. I mean, occasionally they will anyway if they're really canny, but that way you can fire torpedoes unseen and have a much better chance of hitting him. So let's move forward and see what happens here. So you can see Joe's moving outside, which is going to keep him spotted. Now, I'm glad he went to the narrow spread. And you'll see the Ganget is immediately going to start turning. See, I got to get out of here. I know torpedoes are coming because this Nicholas just showed me outside. And in a case like this, while getting the guns working is good, if he had been behind that island and able to throw torpedoes in his face without letting him know that he was there, I think that probably would have been better. One of the things about this game that I find so challenging and fun and exciting, and part of why I keep coming back to this game on an almost daily basis, is that the Ganget is making the mistake of slowing down here, and he's going to pay for that. Is that there are so many things to think about all at the same time in order to be effective in this game. I find that challenging and exciting. I really enjoy it. So Joe does land a torpedo there, but if if something had happened or unfolded kind of the way that I described it, that I might have tried to do it, I think maybe that Ganget would be sunk now. You know, because you can throw torpedoes out one side and then turn your ship and throw torpedoes out the other. And now detected, he's taken significant damage because he's still close. You know, if he'd again, now I've done this before, and I'm sure you've seen DD players who have done this before. We'll go back to our if situation. If Joe had moved inside initially rather than going outside, if he had come inside, thrown torpedoes across this way at the Ganget that was approaching here, if he had hit him with a torpedo and caused any flooding, which you can see that he did, the Ganget would repair. Joe could then move this way in order to stay unseen and then turn his ship out this way to throw torpedoes back across if the battleship came this way. Or, alternately, he could just, back out this way so that his bow was pointed up here and smoke up. You still got ships that are going to be spotting this thing. And what you can do in a case like that is you can make use of the guns on the Nicholas, which are decent for its tier, and try and start fires, because you know there was a flood, which means that he had to repair. And if you can start some fires, well, you're just going to help finish him off that much sooner. But where we're at right now, Joe's in a situation where he's trying to make use of the torpedoes, which is great, but you can see that he's lost rudder control here. Now, I don't know whether he's got at least a 10-point captain and can still maneuver or not. But all of that is kind of an aside to the larger question of was it the best plan to move up to where you're automatically going to be detected, and or to not smoke and just use your guns. So we know at least one or two of those torpedoes are going to go into the island. Now it's tough. It's really tough to be on the move and trying to steer and look at the mini-map and all these, do all those things and place your torpedoes in such a way that they're not going to run into the ground. Now, even though a couple did, there were plenty to finish off the Ganget. Well done. That was great. And really, in the big picture, though Joe did take a little bit of damage here, it certainly was not devastating. It certainly did not put him out of the game or put him in a situation where he's kind of a one-shot kill. So, I think everything that I said was good advice going forward. If you see similar opportunities in the game when playing any DD. But I will say unequivocally, good job. I mean, you finished off that ship. That's your second kill. You've got 47,000 damage. Certainly not criticizing what you're doing, just throwing out options, things for you to consider. Now, the bad guys have lost some ships. You can see they're down to 4. The good guys have still got 5 ships. But the bad guys, while doing that, did secure another cap. I don't see much chance that the bad guys have of winning this at this point. They do have a cap advantage, but that's about to go bye-bye. And you've got this Wyoming who's burning down. I don't see any way he survives this. Way to keep up the steady fire, Joe. That's great. It's exactly what you want to do in these US DDs. If you know somebody's not aimed at you, keep the HE working, especially on battleships, and you can just keep them burning. So they're going to take back this cap. You can see there's a ping saying, hey, I can see that they're there, so that's somebody presumably has either extrasensory perception, or maybe they've got the captain perk radio location, which is telling them kind of the direction of the nearest enemy ship, which is a fantastic skill to have. Now, looking at this, If I were in this ship right now rather than Joe, I would really be hoping that Hawkins would stop. There's at least one DD out here, and there might be two. And Hawkins, yeah, he's slowed down. That's good. Yeah, okay, you can see the torpedoes. So it goes from 14,000 some odd to 241 hit points. So Hawkins is probably going to get shredded. Right, I mean, it just makes sense. Clemson's got good guns. He can just open up and finish off that cruiser, which is the biggest threat at Clemson. And Clemson does finish off the Hawkins. You can see Jaguar and Clemson are both out here. Joe's going to take some damage here if he does not smoke up, but if he smokes up, he may be looking at torpedoes. You can see he's continuing to fire on the Jaguar. Get damage on the Jaguar. Kaiser is moving in. Now this is something that, this is so important, and I've been caught this way quite many times. You can see there's a battleship right here. Two destroyers out here. Almost always, when there's a battleship and enemy destroyers, almost always, if there are torpedoes for these guys available, they're going to try and put them on this battleship, because battleships are not maneuverable. When you put the torpedoes in the water, especially when the battleship is heading your way, you have a good chance of landing at least one torp. So when you're in a destroyer, and you are crossing right into the path of the line between those destroyers and the battleship, you're putting yourself in a position where you're liable to eat a torpedo, and in fact, Joe nearly does here. These torpedoes weren't necessarily meant for Joe. They were probably meant for the Kaiser. Now maybe, if the captain of the Jaguar is really savvy, he saw these as dual-purpose torpedoes. Hey, maybe I catch the Nicholas and the Kaiser. But either way, as a general rule, when you've got enemy DDs or an enemy DD, and you've got a battleship that's pushing toward them, just keep it in the back of your head. I want to stay out of that line between these two ships. Because if the destroyer decides to torp the battleship, which is highly likely, I want to make sure I'm not putting my ship between those two in a position to eat a whole volley of torpedoes. So anyhow, Joe was slowing down, he's smoking up, so I think he's going to avoid these. Nicely done. So no torpedo damage, although it was a close thing. And you can see somebody on the enemy team really knows what they're doing. They did some blind firing, did a little bit of damage to Joe. But Joe still has over half of his original hit points. Now, you know, it's a fairly low tier game. In my opinion, there's really no reason to keep pushing forward. You've got a points lead of, you know, roughly 200 points. And there's no way the Kaiser's going to be able to survive this. He's got a Königsberg and two destroyers just, well, the two, yeah, okay, so there's the fire from the Königsberg. So they're just firing HE shells at him over and over and over. They're going to burn him down if he keeps going the way he's going. Now Joe might be able to secure this cap despite that. Yeah, he's down to 10, 97, 94. But I think once this cap is secured, it's not going to stay secure long, and it's probably a good idea right now to turn your ship and start heading it south. Now why do I say that? Clemson's already pushing in. You can see where that light green detection circle's at. If Joe gets any closer to the Clemson, he's going to, even if he's not firing, he's going to be detected. The Kaiser's almost dead. So let's just say Joe keeps going and gets about here, and the Clemson comes around this island. There's a very small gap right there. That puts him at 3.5 or so kilometers, roughly. And even if Joe isn't firing, he's detected, and he's going to be detected for a while, because if this is how it plays out, Clemson just has to turn and run kind of straight in the direction of where Joe's ship is. And he keeps Joe spotted for himself, Jaguar, and Königsberg. And we're going to assume Kaiser's gone, because he's definitely going to sink. I mean, you can see his hit points are just melting. If Joe is still, if he's still got his bow pointed north, he then has to turn around and show broadside to the Clemson, Jaguar, and Königsberg. That's why I say I would have already turned my ship around and been facing this down this way. You're still in the cap. You still have a chance of securing it. In fact, you have a better chance of securing it. Not that he won't, just that you have a better chance of securing it because there's less chance of being detected. Now we can see with 1.9 seconds, almost certainly Joe's going to secure this cap. But given the direction he's got his ship pointed, it's almost certain he's going to get detected here. So when you can look at this, the map situation, the bigger map situation, you see it up here, you see how close the Clemson is. You look at the mini map, you see the direction the Clemson is coming, and that probably he's going to come around this island and move in this way. Those are the kinds of things that you start thinking, okay, now I need to turn my ship around and start moving away from the Clemson. Maybe I can spot the Clemson for my team. But we look at the even bigger picture. If you secure this cap and just run, you've got the points lead. And even if they take this back and nothing else changes, nobody else sinks, you're still going to win. Now, granted, there's quite a bit of time left. But one other consideration that I'll throw out there is that in a situation like this, you got the good guys who have got 4 ships, the bad guys who have got 3. But who's out here with Joe? Kaiser's about to sink. I mean, that's almost certain. And as soon as he does, there are 3 enemy ships in a position to move this way, and there's just Joe here. There's nothing New York's going to be able to do. He's not going to be able to fire through the island. And look where Phoenix is at. There's nothing he's going to be able to do. He's got 2 islands between himself and wherever these guys are going to be. So all of that is just that much more reason why Joe, in my opinion here, should have been turning his ship the other way rather than moving north. And so we're gonna move forward now, and that's everything that I would consider in this situation. And yes, as I said a little bit ago, you have a lot of things to consider, and I'm sure there are things I'm not considering that it would benefit any player to consider. But those are things that I would be thinking about in the few split seconds you have when you're playing and making a decision. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's not even conscious. But after you've played thousands of games in destroyers, these things just kind of become automatic. So let's just move forward from here and see how it plays out. Okay, down goes the Kaiser. Again, we could see his hit points melting. He was definitely going down. Now, having secured the cap, Joe is turning his ship. Now, one thing, just really quickly, Joe's turning the ship to get out of here, but look at where his guns are pointed. His guns are pointed here. The bad guys are here. And so one thing that you can do is you can be turning your ships, but you can turn your guns to face and you can see Clemson. He didn't even go around the island. He's just coming straight in. And Joe is detected, which means he's got all 3 of these ships now that are going to be firing on him. One thing that you can do is you can swing your guns to, in this case, to the starboard side while you're doing your turn. And you can run with a very narrow profile, more like this, and just use your rear guns to shoot into this guy. Now, another thing to consider is you can see, remember, Joe smoked up, so he doesn't have smoke. In fact, that was his last smoke. So, I think he's going to run for the smoke, but it's going to take him a while to get there, and in the meantime, all 3 of these ships are going to be pouring shells into him. Oh, and you can see the located thing here. That means that, yes, one of these 3 ships has the radio location commander skill. Now, I think it would be a good idea right here to be using your guns. Joe's obviously making for his smoke, which has 38 seconds left on it, so he can break line of sight that way. And you can see Clemson's heading the other direction. So if he can just break line of sight, he'll survive. He's got Jaguar pushing in. I think I'd be using the guns. I'm already detected. It's not going to make that big of a difference, especially knowing that as soon as I cross the threshold of the smoke line, I'm going to go dark. But maybe Joe made the right call. He did go dark. None of those guys were able to really hit him. Didn't bang him up too much. He's behind his smoke. Meanwhile, Phoenix has secured the Alpha cap. And the points lead just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The only chance that the red team have at this point is to finish somebody off. But as long as Joe keeps running, there's no way they're going to catch him. You can see Phoenix is running. Now New York is really, really slow, but it looks like he's running as well. So this one's pretty well over. So I know I made a lot of comments. I know I paused the game and kind of worked through a lot of explanation. I hope that it helped. I will say overall, Joe, I think you did great. You made good use of the guns, and you finished off 2 enemy ships, landed 4 torpedoes. There's a lot to be glad about. I think you did a great job. Thanks a lot for sending me the game file. I always appreciate that, and I'm always glad to do this anytime. To those of you watching, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, if you could like it and maybe think about subscribing, I'd really appreciate that too. And for now, I will say, see you next time.